Hi, this is Ros, and this is
Alf.
And
you may remember me from such videos as being a nerd about Marcus Aurelius on Tilda's channel.
Yeah, Tilly's Shelf. And we're here today to do a starting video for Cromwellathon. And Cromwellathon, that's a bit hard to say, is something that Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse is doing. And he is, like a few of us, really excited that Hilary Mantel's third book in her Wolf Hall Cromwell trilogy is coming out in March, and he suggested that we should read or reread Wolf Hall and Bring Up the Bodies in January and February, so as to be really ready for The Mirror and the Light come March. And I was game for that because I love Hilary Mantel, and Alf said he would give it a go too. So it's a bit.
I think that's a possibly strong way of stating that. I was essentially pressured into it by my beloved mother and sister.
Yeah,
but I've read the first 3 chapters and I've enjoyed it so far, so I'll probably carry on with it.
Yeah, it was in your best interest. We had your best interest at heart.
I know how it ends.
Well, that is a good point. And Tilly's taking part in this, so I think her bookish breakfast on Tilly's Shelf will have some Cromwellathon commenting.
Yeah.
And I will link below to Jason's first video about this, because that is the booktube etiquette, I know. Although obviously I'm fully aware at this point that you're more likely to find me via Jason and Old Blues Chapter and Verse than you are to find him via here. But that's okay. So, and the other thing that you have to do, booktube etiquette, is you just kind of wave the book at this point, Alf. Yep, that's it. Wolf Hall, that's the one. Now, I was really happy to take part in this because I've loved Hilary Mantel for quite a long time. She started writing in the 1980s.
Sure.
Before you were born.
Yes, no, that is before I was born. You were there.
I was there, but yeah. And I've read maybe 4 of her books that she wrote before Wolf Hall. And she was a bit of a private, secret pleasure. Mm-hmm. Like if you came across someone else who'd read one of her books, it would be, oh, isn't she good? Why don't most people read her? Why isn't she better known or have more recognition? Not that she wasn't known at all, but she wasn't a huge writer. And so, there was this secret society of Hilary Mantel appreciators. And then about 2007, I think, Wolf Hall came out, and suddenly she's winning prizes. And
well, it won the Man Booker in 2009, so probably 2008 then it'll come out.
I guess,
I don't know what the eligibility criteria is for that award.
Yeah, yes, no, you're right. And then she won it again for Bring Up the Bodies. Sure. And she's sort of top of the bestseller list and huge. And the cat. Don't do that, cat.
Sorry.
Minerva, behave yourself.
I'm trying to keep her controlled.
Keep her under control.
Very, very lively today, which is nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then it's like the whole world knows Hilary Mantel now.
Yeah.
And do I resent that?
I don't think you resent that. I think you're happy that this thing that you enjoyed is now being shown.
You're right. Absolutely.
I think I liked it before it's cool. There's a bad look on anyone, especially.
It is. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm thrilled that she's getting the recognition she deserves, especially because she's like I really like the idea of a middle-aged woman writer being recognised as being in the prime of her writing career at her age, because...
you were talking about this, there's like a lot of, oh, it's their first novel and it's transcendental and they're going to be the next whatever great author.
Yeah,
but
Sally Rooney's name comes to mind in this. You haven't read her, but
it is true that people get better at stuff the more they've been doing it generally, so it's nice, this sort of acknowledgement that, she's been writing lots of books and she's finally really got into her stride, which I can see as like a pleasant sort of
it's pleasant. And better still, the character she writes about is, well, how would you describe Cromwell?
Well, Cromwell's a really interesting character in sort of that Tudor English history. He's one of these self-made men that really gets to about as high as it is possible to get in English society without being born into the nobility. Yeah.
But is he attractive?
No.
Is he young in the book?
In the very first chapter, he's young, but other than that, no.
Middle-aged man. I'm an attractive middle-aged man. Clever.
Oh yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it?
Super clever.
He's clever and charismatic.
Yeah, in his way. But he's also quite a morally ambiguous character.
Well, yeah, he's what's the Ian M. Banks quote? No, it doesn't matter.
It'll come back to you later. So, and one thing I was thinking about was, why had Hilary Mantel been writing all these good books for years and not become huge, and then with this trilogy it's really kind of hit the heights, as it were. And I think one of the things with her is that all the books she writes are really interesting, but they're all quite different.
Sure. And
it's like people quite like it when a writer
writes the same thing every time. With different characters and different stories, but...
Yeah, so I'm thinking of someone like Terry Pratchett.
Yeah, and like all of those Discworld books are the same book. They're all different books, but they're all...
Which is great, and it's kind of comfortable, and you know what you're going to get, and that's really enjoyable. Whereas you never knew what you were going to get with Hilary Mantel, but with this trilogy you do, because they build from one to the other. So, but they're not comfortable books.
No, I've only read the first 44 pages of this, but it starts with the main character face down in the dirt in the process of being basically kicked to death by his drunkard father.
Yeah,
which is that's like a very... Obviously, it's like metaphorically cool in that he's starting literally in the dirt when he's also starting in the dirt, and he's got this climb ahead of him.
Yes.
But then also it's quite visceral and pulls you in. So it's like that sort of in media res thing. It's very cool.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point there. One of the things, and Jason says this in his first video for Cromwellathon, one of the things that Mantel does really well is she just throws you in there as the reader, and she doesn't sort of feel she has to explain loads of stuff. You just get dropped in. Yeah?
I don't know, I would be worried that if I wasn't as familiar with sort of Tudor society and history, that it might be a bit discombobulating and confusing. But then actually, like in this, like a lot of it does get spelled out for you through voices of the characters discussing it.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, I'd be really interested to hear comments from people who are reading this for the first time and perhaps aren't English, because like if you're English you do the Tudors at school, you really do,
like 6 times
you do the Tudors. Yes, and so you've got a bit of context, whereas it's presumably some people out there are coming to it much more cold, and there's quite a bit of foreshadowing going on. In even in those first 3 chapters. I think.
Absolutely. Well, it's got the discussion of what presumably is like it seeds the whole Reformation thing about like illegal books from Germany, and it seeds the whole divorce thing. That's where Cromwell gets his massive right to power, with Wolsey talking about how the king's unhappy with not getting an heir, and the different religious arguments for and against whether or not his marriage is valid. And it also shows that Wolsey is getting like over-ambitious and overconfident, and will be drawn down with. He's talking about how he used to talk about, we will get the king to do this, and then he's talking about, with the king we will do this, and now Wolsey's switching to, I will do this. And that's just like one paragraph, but it kind of sets up, and if you know that Wolsey is going to be cast out, then it's really easy to see coming.
You see it.
But even if you hadn't, I think it would set up that there was that trajectory. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. Well, it'd be interesting to see what people say about that. But I do think she gets the key themes in really well in those first 3 chapters.
And pinning down, this is what,
completely. Yeah, so, and you mentioned one, which is the kind of the whole religious change and impact of that. One that really jumped out at me, rereading it, was the whole class thing, that Cromwell doesn't come from the traditional ruling class, and nor does Wolsey, but Wolsey's higher class than Cromwell, and then someone and Gardiner kind of like looks down on him, because that's I
think also there's the thing is that Wolsey is using the classic classes and get out clause in that sort of period, where if you're in the church and you can climb ranks in the church effectively, that gets you through it, whereas Cromwell, though he's a religious man, is not a member of the clergy, so he doesn't have that sort of exemption from the existing system.
And his class background gives him a kind of freedom of movement, freedom of action, that some of the other characters won't have, that we're going to come across. But it also makes him vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another interesting thing that I was just talking about, these sort of themes and conflicts, and I don't know if this does actually come through, but there's also in the 3rd chapter where he's talking to his wife about what the king wants and saying how the women of the kingdom will react to that, and the fact that no one in the chapter law had even vaguely referenced that at all, and it's that kind of, there's this whole half of the kingdom that kind of isn't engaged with at all by the political sphere, which I think is very fascinating.
As well. No, that's true, and it's like, especially when one of the things that everyone remembers about Henry VIII's reign is the women, is his wives. That's the cliche that everybody perhaps knows. You picked up on an interesting theme in these first 3 chapters.
To be fair, Hilary spills it out because the 3 chapter blocks all have like subtitles, and this first block is called paternity, and like it is a series of father figures for Cromwell, starting with his actual awful father, moving to his sister's husband who sort of cares about him but isn't willing to put any risk on himself for him. Just gives him some money and says, off you go be a soldier if you're so good at fighting. You've got there's a set of Dutch like cloth merchants on a boat who are the first people that show him any real sort of kindness or aspiration that the world could be better. Offered
to adopt him almost, but
and then you've got obviously the cardinal who's put him under his thumb and is making sort of silly jokes towards him and trusting him to do things.
Yes, you were saying that he and Wolsey, there's almost like kind of dad jokes going on, which I loved.
And then finally you've got like his wife's father, who obviously there's talk about how he helped fix his ailing business, and it's that sort of son coming good for the father kind of aspect to that relationship potentially.
Yes, it's like getting to have a kind of a successful family parent connection. So,
and then there's a little bit of what sort of father Cromwell wants to be to his child,
to Gregory,
and also as an uncle to his nephews. Like I think there's that clear pride that he's doing well enough that he can put his nephews through university as well as his son, which is cool.
So a whole kind of theme around fathers and fatherhood, which I had not. That had passed me by.
And I think that is then obviously linking into the big Henry VIII wants a child. Fatherhood theme as well.
Son, yes, absolutely. Yeah, which is going to be so crucial to the whole book.
Yeah.
So, off to a good start.
I think that's a good start. Yeah. I'll certainly keep reading this.
You'll keep reading? Excellent.
I might have to go and have some practice, sort of calm my palate in between.
Recover. Brilliant. So, maybe talk more next week.